The trouble began early one cold morning when news spread across the small ranching town, like wind through dry grass. 3 Apache women, Ayanna, Tala, and Naira, had been taken by a group of heartless outlaws who had been moving through the territory for weeks. People whispered about the cruelty of these outlaws. They had taken horses before, stolen supplies, and scared travelers. But taking people was something different. The fear in the town grew quickly, and everyone believed that once these women were dragged into the outlaw camp, their chances of rescue were almost gone. But in that same town lived 3 cowboys, Rowan, Seth, and Colby, who were known not only for their skill with horses and cattle, but also for their strong sense of right and wrong. Rowan, the oldest of the 3, was calm and thoughtful. He rarely raised his voice, but he was the kind of man who stepped forward when others stepped back. Seth was bold, sharp-eyed, and quick with his hands and mind. He often acted before speaking, but his instincts were usually right. Colby was the youngest, with a good heart and the kind of spirit that wanted to help anyone in trouble, even when it put him in danger. When they learned about the kidnapping, none of them could stay still. They felt a pull deep inside, a duty to act where others were too afraid. Rowan stood outside the general store, his jaw tight, Seth pacing beside him. Colby rushed over from the stables, breathless from running. "We can't let them disappear," Colby said, his voice trembling with emotion. "Those women didn't do anything wrong." Rowan nodded. "Then we won't let them. We'll go after them." Seth looked between the 2 men and gave the slightest grin. "I thought you'd never say it." They all understood the danger. The outlaws were well armed, and their camp was rumored to be hidden deep in the canyon lands where the trails were narrow and the shadows deep. Still, the 3 cowboys prepared without hesitation. They gathered food, water, ropes, blankets, and spare ammunition. Rowan made sure their horses were well rested and ready for rough terrain. Seth studied the tracks left by the outlaws to guess their direction. Colby packed extra supplies for the women, understanding they would be tired, cold, and hungry. Before leaving, Rowan spoke to the sheriff, but the sheriff only shook his head helplessly. "We don't have enough men. I can't stop you boys, but I can't promise help either," Rowan replied softly. "We're not asking for help. We're just letting you know." Form. And with that, the 3 cowboys set off into the late afternoon light, riding fast and steady across open land that stretched as far as the eye could see. They traveled in silence for the first hour, each man thinking of the danger ahead, thinking of the women who were counting on someone, anyone, to save them. As night approached, Seth signaled for them to stop. He crouched near the ground, studying the dirt and broken twigs. "They passed through here," he said. "Not long ago." Rowan looked at the sky. "We'll travel at night. They won't expect that." So they moved quietly through the darkness, their horses stepping carefully over stones and brush. The moon was thin, making the land shadowy and uncertain. Every sound felt sharper: the cry of a night bird, the rustle of wind through dry plants, the distant howl of a coyote. But the cowboys didn't stop. Their determination carried them forward. After hours of riding, they found another sign marks where horses had been tied, ashes from a fire, and footprints leading deeper into the canyon. Rowan crouched and touched the ground. "They're close," he whispered. "Maybe a few miles." The air grew colder as the canyon walls rose around them like giants. The paths wound sharply, and loose rocks made the trail dangerous. Several times, Colby's horse slipped, but he steadied it with gentle words. Seth scouted ahead, moving quickly and returning often with updates. Rowan stayed in the middle, watching both the rear and the front. By early morning, pale light filled the sky. From a high ridge, they finally saw the outlaw camp. Below them, near the center, Ayanna, Tala, and Naira were tied beside a wagon. The women looked exhausted, their shoulders slumped and their clothes dusty from travel. Around them, Several outlaws lounged near a dying fire. Some sharpened knives or checked their gear. Their loud laughter echoed through the canyon, showing they felt safe. Colby clenched his fists. We have to help them now. Seth scanned the area. We can't rush in. We'll all get caught. Rowan took a long breath and studied the layout of the camp. He pointed to the far side, where brush piled high against rocks. Seth, you go there and start a distraction. A small fire. Enough smoke to draw them, but not too close to the women. Seth nodded. I can do that. Rowan turned to Colby. You'll go down the back side of the ledge. There's a narrow opening between those boulders. It'll take you right behind the wagon. Untie the women and get them ready to run. Colby swallowed but nodded confidently. I won't fail. And I'll stay up here, Rowan continued. I'll give cover if things go wrong. Seth moved quickly, slipping through the brush like someone who had done this many times before. Rowan and Colby stayed low, waiting for the signal. Minutes passed slowly, each one heavier than the last. Finally, a thin smoke trail rose from the far edge of the camp. The outlaws turned their heads. One shouted, "What's that?" Another cursed under his breath. Soon, 5 of them walked toward the smoke, arguing and pushing each other, leaving only one man near the wagon. Rowan whispered, "Now." Colby crawled down the narrow path, keeping his body low. Each step felt longer than the last. His heart hammered in his chest, but he kept going. When he reached the back of the wagon, he peeked around. The guard stood with his back turned, staring at the smoke. Colby moved fast, cutting the ropes with the small knife he always carried. Ayanna gasped softly when she saw him. "Stay quiet," he whispered. "We're here to help." Tala's eyes filled with tears of relief. Naira nodded weakly. But just as the final rope snapped, a loud shout echoed from the other side of camp. Seth's distraction had been discovered. The outlaws were rushing back, anger rising like a storm. The guard near the wagon turned sharply, realizing something was wrong. Everything exploded into chaos at once. Colby pushed the women behind the wagon for protection. Rowan fired a warning shot from above, the sound crackling through the canyon. Seth sprinted back toward the group as the outlaws drew their weapons and yelled orders. The rescue had begun, but so had the danger these cowboys had feared from the start. Gunfire burst through the quiet canyon like sudden thunder, turning the early morning stillness into a storm of shouts and running feet. The outlaws who had rushed toward the smoke now realized the distraction was a trick, and their anger burned hotter than the rising sun. Dust flew beneath their boots as they scrambled back toward the camp, yelling orders and pointing at the wagon where the ropes now lay cut. Their eyes widened with rage when they saw the Apache women no longer tied. Rowan, positioned high on the ridge, kept his rifle steady. He aimed carefully not to harm, but to slow the outlaws down. Each shot hit the ground close to their boots, forcing them to duck, stumble, or scramble for cover. He wanted to buy time, nothing more. He knew once the women were safe, he and the others could escape without anyone getting seriously hurt. Below, Colby guided the women behind a cluster of large rocks. "Stay low," he whispered. "We'll get you out of here." Ayanna held her breath, her hands shaking. But she followed his instructions. Tala tried to support Naira, who was struggling because her wrist was swollen from the tight ropes. The women trusted Colby's calm voice, even in the middle of all the noise. Seth ran toward them from the far side of the camp, his chest rising and falling sharply. He had barely escaped the outlaws who had discovered his fire. As he reached the rocky slope where Colby and the women hid, he stopped only long enough to catch his breath. "They're angry," Seth said. "More than I expected." Rowan called down from above. "Move toward the path behind the rocks. I'll cover you." The trail Rowan meant was narrow and hidden, a small crack between canyon walls that only someone familiar with the land might notice. The Apache women knew it well. When they heard Rowan mention it, their eyes flashed with recognition. "There is a safe way through there," Ayanna said, pointing. "It leads to higher ground, and then to a valley." They cannot follow easily. Then that's where we head, Rowan replied. Colby helped Naira stand, while Seth took the lead to scout the path ahead. Rowan kept firing only when he needed to, slowing the outlaws without harming anyone. The outlaws shot back a few times, but their bullets hit rocks or sand, far from the escaping group. As they moved up the narrow path, the canyon walls squeezed closer, making it hard to walk. Tala stumbled once, and Seth quickly grabbed her arm, steadying her. "We'll take it slow," he told her gently. Colby stayed behind the women, ready to help if anyone slipped. Rowan was still above on the ridge, walking backward with careful steps while keeping an eye on the outlaws. Every movement had purpose, every breath carried determination. When the group reached the top of the narrow path, they found themselves on a wider trail that curved toward the valley Ayana had described. From here, the land opened up slightly, but danger still followed. They could hear the outlaws' voices echoing through the canyon below. The men were determined and too angry to give up easily. "We have to keep moving," Rowan said as he finally joined them. Sweat covered his forehead. Dust clung to his shirt, but his eyes stayed sharp and calm. The group continued down the trail. It twisted and turned, sometimes steep and sometimes flat. The morning sun slowly rose, warming the land and lighting their way. But the warmth didn't make them relax. Every sound behind them made their hearts beat faster. Along the path, there were places where the rocks narrowed again, forcing them to walk in a single line. The Apache women helped guide the cowboys, pointing out loose stones or sharp drops. Their knowledge of the land became a lifeline for everyone. After some time, they stopped for a moment behind a large boulder. Naira leaned against it, trying to ease the pain in her wrist. Colby quickly tore a strip from his own shirt and wrapped it gently around her arm. "It's not perfect," he said, "but it should help until we reach safety." Naira looked at him with grateful eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Meanwhile, Ayana stood on a small ledge, looking back down the trail. She could see the outlaws in the distance. They were climbing slowly, struggling with the narrow paths. Rowan stood beside her. "They'll catch up," Ayana said quietly. "Not if we stay ahead," Rowan replied. "You three lead the way. We'll follow." Seth, who had rested for only a few seconds, nodded. Time to move again. They continued their escape, moving as quickly as the terrain allowed. The trail eventually began to widen, and the valley entrance came into view. A faint breeze blew through the trees, bringing the smell of fresh water. The land ahead looked peaceful, with tall grass, scattered rocks, and a river that shimmered in the early light. "That's it," Tala said, relief softening her voice. "Once we cross the river, they will not come after us." Seth looked confused. "Why not?" "It is Apache land," Ayana explained. "They know our people protect this place. Outlaws do not come here." Colby smiled faintly. "Then let's get across." But even the last stretch was not simple. The outlaws reached the top of the canyon path just as the group began moving across the open valley. Their angry shouts filled the air, pushing the cowboys to hurry. The valley was wide, leaving them exposed. Rowan took the rear again, his rifle ready. Seth stayed with Tala, who was growing tired. Colby supported Naira, helping her keep her balance. Ayana moved in front, guiding them toward the river. The outlaws, seeing their targets in the open, started running faster. Rowan fired 2 more shots into the dirt near their feet. The message was clear. Keep your distance. The group finally reached the riverbank. The water rushed quickly, but it wasn't deep. Seth stepped in first to test the strength of the current. "We can cross," he said. "Hold hands if needed." The women crossed together, helping one another stay steady. Colby walked beside Naira to keep her safe. Seth guided Tala, and Rowan walked backward through the water, still watching the outlaws. When they reached the far side, the outlaws stopped at the edge of the river. They stood there, breathing hard, anger burning in their eyes. But none dared step forward. They shouted threats, but the cowboys knew it was just noise now. The rescue was complete. Rowan lowered his rifle. Seth let out a long breath. Colby smiled with relief as Naira leaned against him for a moment. Just a few minutes later, several Apache riders appeared in the distance. They had been alerted earlier, when Rowan sent up a smoke signal from the ridge. The riders approached with purpose, their faces serious but grateful when they recognized the women. Ayana ran forward to meet them, tears shining in her eyes. Tala and Naira followed, embraced by their people. The Apache elders thanked the cowboys with deep respect, speaking with calm voices and warm eyes. The women told the full story, explaining how the cowboys risked everything to save them. Rowan, Seth, and Colby didn't ask for rewards. They simply said they did what was right. But the Apache people insisted on honoring them. Food was shared, horses were offered for rest, and blankets were given so the cowboys could warm themselves after the long journey. Later, as the sun rose high over the land, the three cowboys sat together quietly, watching the peaceful valley. Their bodies were tired, but their hearts felt light. They had saved 3 innocent women and protected their families from deep sorrow. Their bravery became a story told by ranching folk and Apache families alike, a tale of courage, unity, and the strength of standing up against cruelty. And though the cowboys never expected to be remembered, their actions lived on, proving that sometimes the smallest group of people can make the biggest difference.